Well, we said autumn was going to get off to an unsettled autumnal start, and it's fair to say that it has. And that's the theme that we'll take through the next 10 days or so as well. Let's look at the bigger picture though, and we do have low pressure across the country at the moment, which is why we've had plenty of heavy, showery rain around, even some rumbles of thunder. That low's actually clearing away towards the north, but then there's an occluded front that's pushing its way in from the southwest. That's going to feed across parts of England and Wales as we go through Thursday, and this brings the focus for some heavy, thundery, showery rain. Now, it's kind of in a line running from South Wales through the Midlands up towards the Humber, where we have the greatest risk of some intense, thundery downpours. We do have a warning out because we're looking at the potential for 30 to 60 millimetres perhaps in just an hour or so. That's enough to cause some flash flooding in a few places. And even elsewhere away from the warning area, there will be quite a few showers around, and some of them could be heavy. There'll be some bright sunny spells in between, and actually the showers are going to be easing as we go later on. That's because things are set to turn a bit drier for many of us as we go through into Friday. Notice lower pressure further away as we go through into Friday, and actually there's an area of higher pressure towards the south of us, and this is starting to build. So that's going to settle our weather down, albeit only for a short period of time. Friday then, looking largely fine, not totally dry. A few showery bursts across some western parts through the morning. Otherwise, a good deal of dry, often sunny weather, though perhaps a bit more cloud bubbling up as we go into the afternoon, and a few more showers developing here or there. Most of us, though, having the driest day of the week. Towards the far northwest of Scotland, maybe a bit more thicker cloud, a bit of rain and some blustery winds pushing in, but most places, yeah, staying largely dry and just a few showers to watch out for, perhaps. Then, as we go into the weekend, and let's look at the other side of the Atlantic, because there are a few things I want to highlight. There's an area of low pressure that's heading our way, more on that in a second, but actually we have a double jet stream set up, in as much as we have this southerly jet, which is going to be the driving force initially for this area of low pressure, but also a more northerly jet. And it's this one that I want to pay attention to, because if we run it through the next few days, and actually this more northerly jet, it's going to get influenced by an upper trough, and then it's going to start to extend a little bit further southwards. And as it does so, it's going to sort of merge with the more southerly jet, and then that combined jet is going to strengthen this low pressure as it heads towards the UK. So it's going to be the driving force pushing it through and leading to this low pressure deepening. Before that, it's kind of staying a little bit out towards the west as we go through at least the beginning part of the weekend. So actually a good deal of fine weather still on Saturday, high pressure towards the east, so low pressure towards the west. But as we go through into Sunday, this low pressure system, it's going to sort of throw the front across the country, which is why we are going to see some more unsettled weather at times. So definitely Sunday looking like the wetter, the windier day of the weekend. One other thing that I did want to highlight is the fact that even though there's some unsettled weather around, we are actually dragging in some relatively warm air. And so, you know, on paper, temperatures on Sunday could get into the mid, possibly even high 20s, but I actually think that's quite unlikely, because if we run through now the weather that we're expecting through this weekend, and as I mentioned, the low pressure staying out towards the west on Saturday, so actually most places having a good deal of fine weather. There may be some high level clouds, so the sunshine can be a bit hazy at times and turning a bit wetter, windier across the far west later on, but it's not really until Sunday when the real effect of this low pressure out towards the west of us is going to be felt, and it's going to then drive some very, well, wet and at times windy weather through. And with that, there'll be some cloud around. And so although we have that warm air across us because of the unsettled cloudy weather, I'm not really expecting temperatures to get especially high, low 20s perhaps in some places. Now, this area of low pressure is looking quite deep. We're looking at the potential for it to get to around 975, 980. So we do need to watch out for the strong winds, but also the heavy rain that's coming through as we go through Sunday. I wanted to show you some rainfall totals. Now, this is a little bit unclear, so let's zoom down into the details. And lots of places are likely to see rainfall in the 10 to 30 millimetre kind of bracket as we go through the whole day. But there are a couple of places which are being pinpointed on the model. You can see the yellows where we could get potentially 50 to 60. Now there are still some question marks, some uncertainty as to exactly how quickly this is going to come through and exactly where we're going to see the heaviest rain. So don't take these peaks too literally at this stage, but nonetheless be prepared. It could be quite a wet day. Then on Monday, still heavily under the influence of this low pressure centre. I think it's probably going to be at its deepest later Sunday as we go into Monday. So still some very unsettled weather to start the working week. And with that, yes, heavy rain pushing through and even some strong winds still. So an unsettled story for now. And really, that's the theme through much of next week. If we look at the 3 most likely setups for next Tuesday, and they're all pretty similar. The most likely setup has that low pressure that's developing, shifting just a bit towards the northwest, but the second and third have the low pressure systems a fair bit closer. And so if these came off, then it would be another pretty wet and windy day. If this one's comes off, then slightly less wet and windy because the low's a bit further away, but nonetheless the unsettled theme pushing through. Now worth bearing in mind the shaded colours, the blues, are indicating where it's going to be wetter than is seasonal average. So not necessarily dry everywhere else, just wetter than seasonal average where the blues are. If we run through another day and we go towards Wednesday, and this time the most likely setup has that low pressure a bit closer towards us, so a wetter day perhaps, and again the second and third most likely setups still quite similar, all going with the idea of low pressure somewhere around the northwest or west of the UK, and it's a similar story on Thursday and a similar story on Friday, albeit starting to see the low pressure drift away in some model runs, but by no means all of them. Many keeping that low pressure nearby, that unsettled theme. Because of the position of the low pressure generally towards the northwest of the UK, you would always expect the rain to be heaviest and the strongest winds across western parts of the country. Further east, a greater chance of staying dry, but even here I am expecting some wet weather to push through at times as well. Now looking through the next 2 weeks, one thing that we often show you is this probabilistic pressure trend chart, and I wanted to highlight it because, in last week's 10-day trend, I hinted by around by the 7th, 8th of September, there were some signs of higher pressure returning, but that now looks less likely, which is why it's likely that we're going to stick with this unsettled autumnal theme really as we go through the next 10 days. And whilst there are some signs of higher pressure returning kind of again in the end of the 10-day period, kind of similar to what I said last week, but just been delayed a week, I'm not too confident about this because notice the reds have become less intense with more recent model runs. So whilst it looked a bit more likely with older model runs, it's looking less and less likely. So I think it may be slightly less unsettled perhaps as we go towards the back end of next week, but not necessarily a big whacking great area of high pressure or any settled weather that's going to last particularly long, something to keep an eye out for. We often talk of the 6 to 10-day ridge, and I think that's what we're seeing at the moment. It's a ridge of high pressure that appears in model runs, but it's always around 10 days ahead and it just keeps getting pushed back, and I think in this instance it may never actually come off. Nonetheless, I am expecting the weather to quieten down a little bit, but perhaps not totally quiet. So in summary, through the next 10 days, really it's staying unsettled. Most of us, if not all of us, will see some showers or even some longer spells of rain, which could lead to some rainfall totals building up. Many of you may be saying that's well needed, and in some parts it truly is. But with that, we will also have some strong winds, coastal gales, that kind of thing, and temperatures around average, maybe a little bit below at times, obviously in the unsettled weather, feeling fairly unpleasant, but there will be some drier spells Friday, Saturday, for example, largely dry, so not feeling too bad in those drier periods. Of course, we will be keeping you up to date with the forecast through the next 10 days, so make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel, and so you'll never miss one of those. We'll have the weekend forecast, for example, tomorrow. I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.